The forgotten prophecy, the council chamber of Nexus Prime, gleamed like a jewel suspended in the void. Crystalline spires rose from its foundation, each one representing a member species of the Galactic Confederation. 847 towers caught the light of 3 suns, refracting it into a cascade of colors that painted the assembly hall in eternal dawn. For 12,000 years, this chamber had been the heart of galactic civilization, a place where disputes were resolved with words, where trade routes were negotiated over fermented nectar, and where the very concept of war had become a historical curiosity, studied by academics. Ambassador Velshara of the Korath Collective adjusted her ceremonial sash as she approached the central podium. Her chitinous form clicked softly against the polished floor, her 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates with practiced ease. Today's agenda was routine: trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and the perennial debate about expanding into the Silent Quadrant, that vast stretch of space beyond the galactic rim that had remained unexplored for millennia. Honored delegates. Velshara's voice resonated through the chamber's translation matrix, converting her clicking mandibles into 1,000 languages simultaneously. The Exploration Directorate has identified 3 promising systems in the Silent Quadrant. Initial surveys indicate habitable worlds, primitive life, and no technological signatures. I propose we dispatch survey teams within the lunar cycle. Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. The Silent Quadrant had been off-limits since before most species had achieved spaceflight, a restriction whose origins were lost to time. Only the oldest races remembered why certain regions of space carried warning beacons, and even they dismissed such concerns as the paranoid relics of a more superstitious age. I must. Object. A voice cut through the chamber, like a blade through silk. Every delegate turned toward the architect's tower, structure of impossible geometry that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. From its shadows emerged Keeper Mothrin, his ancient form barely holding corporeal shape. The architects were the eldest race in the known galaxy, the first to achieve consciousness, the builders of the network that allowed faster-than-light travel. Only 17 remained, and Mothran was the last who still participated in galactic affairs. His appearance at a council session was unprecedented in 3 centuries. Keeper Mothran. Velshara inclined her head respectfully, though irritation flickered in her secondary eyes. We are honored by your presence. However, the Silent Quadrant restrictions are antiquated. Our sensors have detected no threats, no hostile civilizations. Nothing but the third sun, Mothrin interrupted, his form solidifying as he moved toward the central floor. Where he passed, the air shimmered with data ancient scripts and star charts that predated the Confederation itself. Tell me, Ambassador, in your eagerness to expand, did your survey teams identify a yellow dwarf star in the Silent Quadrant? One with a third planet covered in water. Velshara's mandibles clicked uncertainly. There are several such systems. Class G stars with water worlds are not uncommon. What relevance? Then you have found it. Mothran's voice carried a weight that silenced the chamber. The world we locked away. The world the prophecy warned us about. He gestured, and the holographic display at the chamber's center exploded into light. Ancient text scrolled across the air, written in a language that preceded all modern tongues. The translation matrix struggled to render it into contemporary speech. When the bipeds of the third world claim the void, none shall stand against them. Born of fire and chaos, they will bend the stars to their will. The patient hunters, the eternal warriors. The species that turn suffering into strength, these are the children of soul. Lock their cradle away, lest they wake before the galaxy is ready. Nervous laughter rippled through the assembly. Delegate Threxmer of the Peaceful Union stood, his translucent form pulsing with amusement. Keeper Mothran, with all due respect, we left such superstitions behind millennia ago. Prophecies? Locked away death worlds? We are a civilization of reason, not fear. You are a civilization that has forgotten why you should fear, Mothran countered. His form flickered, showing glimpses of memory-vast wars, burning worlds, species screaming in languages long extinct. 50,000 years ago, my people encountered them. They were primitives then, barely beyond stone tools, but already they exhibited the traits that made them ... unique. They killed not just for food, but for territory. They warred not just between tribes, but between families. They questioned everything, tested everything, broke everything to understand how it worked. Curiosity and conflict are not unique to one species, Velshara argued. Many races passed through violent phases before achieving enlightenment. Did any of your races domesticate the apex predator of your world and make it love you? Mothran asked quietly. Did any of your races climb to the top of the food chain, not through claws or venom, but through thrown rocks and persistence? Did any of your races look at the fastest creature on your planet and say, I will chase it until it collapses from exhaustion? Silence fell over the chamber. The humans, that is what they call themselves, are persisters. Pursuit predators. They are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most venomous. But they are relentless. They adapt. They improvise. They turn every setback into a lesson and every defeat into fuel for eventual victory. Mothran's form solidified into something almost solid, almost threatening. My people quarantined their world not because we feared what they were, but what they would become. And yet, Velshara pressed, they remain primitive. Our surveys detected only electromagnetic radiation radio waves, television signals. They have barely achieved atomic energy. They are no threat to a civilization that spans 10,000 light years. Then I pray to the ancient void that you are correct, Mothran said softly. But know this, we placed warning beacons around their star system. We encoded the prophecy in every major language. We left monuments on their moon and probes at the edge of their solar system, all bearing the same message. Leave this species alone until they choose to leave themselves. He turned his ancient gaze on the assembly. Those warnings still stand. They stand for a reason. But the council had already made its decision. Velshara called for a vote, and the result was overwhelming. The silent quadrant would be opened. Survey teams would be dispatched. And if they encountered the primitive inhabitants of Sol 3, they would be offered the standard first contact protocols. Join the Confederation. Accept uplift technology. Abandon warfare. Embrace peace. Mothran withdrew to his tower without another word, his form dissolving into shadow and memory. 3 weeks later, Commander Zixter stood on the bridge of the survey vessel Harmony's Quest, watching a blue marble grow larger in the viewscreen. The planet was beautiful swirls of white cloud, vast green continents, deep blue oceans. Preliminary scans confirmed the presence of billions of inhabitants, primitive cities, and a shocking level of atmospheric pollution. They've achieved orbital satellites, his tactical officer reported, her tone bemused. Rudimentary space stations. Chemical rockets. They're at least 2 centuries from faster-than-light capability. Zixter's translator rendered his satisfied hum. Then we've arrived at the perfect time. Before they damage their biosphere irreparably, we can guide them toward sustainability. Before they waste resources on weapons, we can show them the path of peace. Commander, the sensor officer interrupted, his voice uncertain. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures across the planet's surface. Concentrated radiation consistent with controlled nuclear fission. Hundreds of sites. And they appear to be weaponized. Impossible. Zixter moved to the sensor station. No species weaponizes atomic energy before achieving spaceflight. The fallout alone would, He stopped, staring at the data. The humans had not only split the atom, they had done it in warfare. The scans showed the residual signatures of 2 ancient detonations, cities vaporized decades ago, and somehow the species had survived. Thrived even. "Open a channel," Zixter ordered, pushing aside his unease. "Standard first contact protocols. Let us welcome these humans to the galactic community." The transmission was simple. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, visual representations of the Confederation's peaceful intentions. It broadcast across every frequency, designed to be impossible to miss. The response came within an hour dot. It was not a welcome. It was not a greeting. It was a single phrase in a dozen human languages, transmitted with enough power to reach the outer planets. "Identify yourself or leave our system." Zixter blinked his 3 eyes in confusion. There. Demanding we identify ourselves? We're offering them the stars, and they're treating us as trespassers? "Commander," a tactical officer's voice was tight. "Sensors are detecting multiple launches from the planet's surface. Primitive chemical rockets, but they're armed. Nuclear-tipped missiles. Dozens of them. Trajectory indicates they're aimed at us. Evasive action," Zixter commanded, but he was too slow. The Harmony's quest had been designed for exploration, not combat. Its shields were meant to deflect micrometeorites, not weapons. The first missile detonated 3 kilometers from the hull. The electromagnetic pulse scrambled half their systems. The second and third impacts rocked the ship, and suddenly alarms were screaming across every console. Through the chaos and radiation, Zixter watched as smaller craft angular, aggressive things built like daggers rose from the planet's surface. They moved with a grace that belied their primitive construction, vectoring toward his crippled vessel with clear hostile intent. In that moment, as his ship burned and his crew scrambled for escape pods, Commander Zixter understood what Keeper Mothron had tried to tell them. The humans had not been waiting for first contact. They had been preparing for invasion, and the galaxy had just made the worst mistake in 12,000 years. Asterisk the storm breaks. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of the Harmony's Quest incident. Commander Zixter stood before the assembly, his body still bearing the scorch marks from his vessel's near destruction. Of his crew of 47, only 19 had survived the encounter. The rescue ships had found them drifting in escape pods, watching as human fighter craft circled their wreckage like predators, ensuring their prey was truly dead. "They fired without provocation," Zixter reported, his voice hollow with shock. "We broadcast peace. We offered them knowledge, technology, a place among the stars. They responded with nuclear weapons." Ambassador Velshara's mandibles clicked in agitation. "This is unprecedented. In 12,000 years, not a single first contact scenario has resulted in violence. These humans are clearly suffering from some form of species-wide paranoia. They must be taught that such aggression has no place in civilized space." "Perhaps," suggested Delegate Threxmer, his translucent form pulsing with concern, "we should reconsider Keeper Mothrian's warnings. If this species is truly as dangerous as the prophecy suggests—" "The prophecy is mythology," Velshara snapped. "What we face is a primitive species that has developed weapons beyond its wisdom. This is not unprecedented. It is simply accelerated. The solution remains the same. We must establish order." The debate raged for 3 planetary rotations. The moderate faction argued for withdrawal, for giving humanity time to mature. But they were outvoted by the hardliners who saw the attack on the Harmony's Quest as an insult to the Confederation's authority. If one primitive species could fire on a peaceful vessel without consequences, what message would that send to the galaxy? In the end, the Council authorized what it called peacekeeping action. The armada of 7 suns would be deployed to Earth's orbit. They would establish a blockade, cut off the planet's primitive space infrastructure, and force the humans to negotiate. It would be a show of overwhelming force, not to destroy, but to compel obedience. Fleet Admiral Krishna commanded the armada from the dreadnought Inevitable Unity. His species, the Valorians, had been warriors once, thousands of years ago, before they had evolved beyond such base instincts. But their ships still carried the legacy of that violent past shields that could withstand stellar radiation weapons. Designed to crack planets if necessary, though such force had not been used in living memory. This will be resolved in days, Kreshno assured his officers as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. We will not need to fire a single shot. The moment they see our fleet, they will understand the futility of resistance. The armada consisted of 300 vessels, representing 40 different species. It was the largest military deployment since the Unification Wars, 10,000 years past. Surely, Kreshno thought, no primitive species could look upon such might and choose confrontation over cooperation. The human response came not in words, but in silence. As the armada advanced through the solar system, passing the orbits of distant ice giants and red-dusted rocks, their sensors picked up nothing. No transmissions. No emergency broadcasts. No pleas for mercy. Just the quiet hum of a planet going about its business, as though 300 warships weren't bearing down upon it. They're evacuating their orbital stations, the sensor officer reported, pulling everything down to the planet's surface, or to their moon. They're fortifying. Kreshno's scaled brow furrowed. Fortifying? With what? Chemical rockets and nuclear weapons? Against energy shields and graviton beams? It was like watching a primitive tribe preparing to fight a hurricane with wooden spears. The armada established orbit, and Kreshno broadcast his ultimatum. Surrender all weapons. Accept Confederation oversight. Submit to uplift protocols. The alternative, he made clear, was isolation, a complete blockade that would strangle their civilization in its cradle. A human response came 3 hours later. It was not a transmission to the fleet, but a broadcast from their planet's surface, sent on every frequency to every corner of their solar system. A single human female appeared on screen, her face weathered, her eyes hard. She spoke in one of their dominant languages, which the translation matrix rendered for the fleet. To the aliens in our sky, you came uninvited. You were warned to leave. You remain, making demands of a sovereign species on its own world. Humanity does not submit. Humanity does not surrender. If you want our world, you'll have to take it, and we will make you regret trying. The transmission ended. In its wake came laughter across the armada's communication channels. The audacity of it, a species that had barely touched its own moon, threatening an armada that could glass their planet from orbit. Maintain blockade positions, Krishna ordered. They will see reason when their supplies dwindle, when they realize they are truly alone. But 6 months passed, and Earth did not break. Instead, something far more troubling occurred. The blockade ships began reporting system malfunctions, communication blackouts, sensor ghosts, small human craft appearing seemingly from nowhere, striking with crude but effective weapons, then vanishing before retaliation could be coordinated. How are they getting past our sensor net? Kreshno demanded, staring at the holographic display showing another damaged frigate limping back to the fleet core. We don't know, Admiral, his tactical officer admitted. They're using some form of stealth technology, but it's wrong. It's not sophisticated. They're coating their vessels in materials that absorb our scanner frequencies. It's primitive, inefficient, and somehow effective, because we never anticipated such a crude solution. More disturbing were the reports from boarding teams sent to inspect damaged human satellites. The Confederation had hoped to salvage some of Earth's orbital infrastructure to study their primitive technology. Instead, they found traps. explosive charges, radiation leaks. On one station, a boarding team of 12 had been locked inside and vented into space when the humans remotely activated the station's self-destruct. They're willing to destroy their own infrastructure rather than let us have it, Belshazzar reported to the council, her voice tinged with disbelief. They're operating on principles we haven't seen since the ancient wars. Scorched earth, denial of assets. These are concepts from our prehistory. Keeper Mothran, watching from his tower, said nothing. But those who looked closely could see the set of his ancient form, not satisfaction at being proven right, but a deep, profound sorrow. The true shock came in the 7th month of the blockade. The inevitable. Unity's sensors detected a massive energy spike from Earth's moon, the same moon where humanity had planted their flag decades ago in a primitive display of territorial pride. Before anyone could react, the lunar surface erupted, not with nuclear fire, but with something far more sophisticated, kinetic bombardment. Humanity had been mining their moon, secretly, under cover of their primitive lunar bases. They had built mass drivers electromagnetic catapults and loaded them with tons of lunar rock accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles screamed through space, too fast for point defense systems designed to stop missiles, not hypervelocity rocks. 7 Confederation ships were struck before the fleet could scatter. The inevitable Unity survived only because Athea. Cruiser took the hit meant for the flagship, its shields collapsing as hundreds of tons of lunar regolith punched through its hull at relativistic speeds. They weaponized their moon, Crescenal whispered, staring at the tactical display in horror. They turned their own satellite into a fortress, and we never even noticed. But that was only the beginning. Within days, human vessels began appearing at the edge of Confederation space, actual human ships, not the primitive chemical rockets of 6 months prior. They were crude, jury-rigged things, but they moved faster than light. Impossibly, they had achieved FTL travel. The mystery was solved when a human ship was finally destroyed and its wreckage recovered. The humans had reverse-engineered Confederation technology from the ruins of the Harmony's quest. In 6 months, they had torn apart systems it took most species centuries to develop, understood the principles, and built their own versions using their primitive industrial base. They shouldn't have been able to do this, the Confederation's chief scientist reported to the Council, his tentacles writhing in agitation. The mathematics alone should have taken them decades to decipher. The materials science, the power generation, the navigation, each element represents breakthrough discoveries that... And yet they did it, Belshazzar interrupted. In 6 months, the human raids intensified. They struck supply convoys, hit isolated outposts, and then vanished back into the void. They didn't fight fair. They used ambushes, feints, false retreats that lured Confederation ships into kill zones. They targeted life support, communications, and command vessels. They studied how the Confederation fought and adapted with terrifying speed. At the Battle of Kepler, stationed a minor trading post near human Spacea. Confederation defense fleet of 50 ships engaged 12 human vessels. The humans should have been annihilated. Instead, they used the station itself as cover, forcing the Confederation fleet to risk hitting the civilian structure. When the Confederation hesitated, the humans didn't. They crippled half the fleet and escaped with minimal losses. They fight like we're the enemy, one ship captain reported, his voice shaking. Like this is total war. Like every battle might be their last. We're trying not to cause casualties, and they're trying to survive. How do you fight someone who's more desperate than you? It was Keeper Mothran who finally appeared before the council once more, his ancient form solidifying with an effort that left the very air trembling. You want to understand them? He asked the assembled delegates. Then understand this. You have united them. Every human nation, Every tribe, every faction that has warred with each other for 50,000 years, you gave them a common enemy. You did what they could never do themselves. You made them one species with one purpose. He gestured, and the holographic display showed Earth's history millennia of warfare, genocide, conquest, and bloodshed. They have fought each other with stone and bronze, and steel and atom. They have killed billions of their own kind. And from each war, they learned. They refined the art of violence into a science. While you were building peace, they were perfecting conflict. We can still stop them, Velshara argued, though her voice lacked conviction. We have thousands of ships, millions of troops, and they have one thing you lost 12,000 years ago, Mothran interrupted. They remember how to fight. Not for territory, not for resources, but for survival. You see war as a problem to be solved. They see it as a crucible that makes them stronger. The prophecy's final lines appeared in the air. The patient hunters. The eternal warriors. The species that turns suffering into strength. They will not stop, Mothran continued. They cannot stop. Because stopping means submission, and submission means extinction. They learned that lesson from their own history, and they will never forget it. The council chamber fell silent. In that silence, each delegate confronted the same terrible realization. They had not encountered a primitive species to be uplifted. They had awakened something that should have remained dormant. 3 days later, Ambassador Velshara stood before the council once more, but this time to present a human ambassador, Sarah Chun. The same woman who had broadcast humanity's defiance 7 months ago. Sarah Chun wore a simple uniform, her gray hair pulled back, her brown eyes scanning the assembled species with neither fear nor only cautious evaluation. The Galactic Confederation sues for peace, Velshara announced, each word like acid in her mouth. We offer cessation of hostilities, trade agreements, and a seat on this council. Sarah let the silence stretch before responding. We don't want a seat at a table where we're expected to be grateful for scraps. We want equal standing, equal voice, equal respect. That is unprecedented for a species so young, Threxmer ventured. Then set a precedent, Sarah replied. You came to our world expecting submission. We gave you war. Now you offer peace expecting gratitude. We offer terms. She placed the data tablet on the podium. Full sovereignty. No interference in our internal affairs. Technology exchange, not donation. And most importantly, a mutual defense pact where we provide what you've forgotten how to do. Fight. The council erupted in protest. But Keeper Mothrain's laughter cut through the chaos, a sound like stars dying. Ancient and terrible, and somehow amused. Do you not see? He asked the assembly. This is what the prophecy meant. They will not join your peace. They will remake it in their image. And the galaxy will be safer for it, because the next threat you face will not come from within, but from beyond. And when that day comes, you will be grateful that you have humans standing beside you. 5 years later, human vessels patrolled the Confederation's borders. Human military advisors trained forces that had forgotten the skills their ancestors once possessed. Human engineers improved weapon systems that had stagnated for millennia. And in the council chamber of Nexus Prime, a new tower rose smaller than the others, built of steel and stone from Earth, angular and aggressive in its architecture. The human tower stood as a reminder to every species in the Confederation. Legends never fade. They simply wait for the right moment to remind the galaxy why they were feared in the first place. And humanity, born of fire and chaos, had finally come home to the stars. Asterisk.